Welcome to season 2 of the Beauty Way podcast with Carissa. Hooray!
Hooray!
I'm so excited to move into this collaboration, and I wanted us to share today a little bit about what it means for us and why this has come about before we head into it. But firstly, I just want to say welcome, co-host Carissa.
Yay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yay, we'll see what magic we can create. And Carissa said yes to me asking her if she wants to co-host because I was feeling into the second season. And I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted it to be in my creation. And I love creating in partnership. And so when I fell into the possibility of creating this podcast in partnership, Carissa was the first person that jumped into my mind. And the reason is because I also love having deep meaningful conversations. And I know that this woman is like really present and asks great questions. And I felt as though we would be such a great match of being able to go deep on different topics and be able to just share and flow with one another. So I'm super excited. And she was the first guest on my very first season. And we had actually discussed this way back then of the potential of having an episode where we went backwards and forwards. So instead of just going in with an episode, we've gone with the whole series.
Yay! It's so fun. It was so awesome when Kirsty invited me. It was so beautiful because I have wanted to do a podcast in the same similar fashion for a really long time. And I have been, wrapped up in some other creative endeavors for the last while, and it just hasn't felt like the space has been there to create. And so when you messaged me and asked to do a whole series, my whole body just lit up and was like, yes, this is definitely what we're going to do. And it felt so exciting and so fun to co-create with you, particularly because I love you and I love the way that we get to bounce off of each other and the way that we co-create together already in the different ways that we are in our friendship. And so to come and do this on a podcast just feels like super, super fun. Yeah. So thanks for
Everyone just gets
inviting
to
me.
join in our conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, that's the thing about podcasts, the amount of times that you're sitting with a friend and you're having this really profound conversation. You're like, oh, we should be recording this. This is what we get to do now. So
Yeah, it's very cool.
yeah, super fun. So thanks for inviting me. It feels like a real honor to be able to be here for a whole series. So fun.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And the Beauty Way originally began because I wanted to share ordinarily extraordinary people, as I say, with the world and like with my world, and be able to just inspire others to move into the space of creation and to recognize that, all it really takes of us being able to embrace our uniqueness is a decision and a commitment to ourself. And so people that I had on the last podcast were people that I know personally and that I would love to that I really wanted to share their stories and for them to share their stories with the world, because all of those people have something inspiring, which every single one of us has something inspiring to
Mm.
share about creation. And so that's where we're going to extend this series. We're going to talk about creation and uniqueness and creativity, and we're inviting people who have their own specific bent on creativity and uniqueness, and the ways that they've embraced their own uniqueness and how they're sharing that with the world. So that's where we're going to go. And we don't know exactly how we're going to get there at this point in time. We just know what our intention is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The best place to start with an intention, with an idea, and allowing the full flow of that to unravel. We don't have any notes, we don't have anything that we specifically need to speak to. And yet we just allow it to kind of come through and channel and just have an awesome conversation. And I feel really excited. We've got a few guests on the queue.
Lined up. And we have
lined
a
up?
few. Well, I know I personally have one that I would love to get on here, who would be
Yes.
who would be so amazing to have a conversation with. So holding that frequency to
Yes.
connect with this particular person.
Yeah, me too, holding that as well. I feel like we should name it. Can we?
Okay. All right. So I messaged, let's name it. So I messaged Carissa because the beauty way is all about living a way of, well, let's talk about that first. The beauty way is all about living a way that is connected to the earth, connected to the evolution of humanity, connected to living our creativity, living abundance, and connecting into that every single day. I think I said connecting a few times then. And so the people that we invite are people that believe, not just believe that way, but live that way as well. Did you want to add anything else to that little piece?
No, I don't think so. That covered it.
And so when I said to Carissa, I said, you know what? I would love for us to get Zach Bush onto our podcast. So if
And
anyone knows Zach Bush or is connected to Zach Bush, please reach out to us, because
yeah,
it would be so amazing to have him in conversation and just sit here and ask him questions, because he is one of the most beautiful humans on the planet.
I agree. I agree. And it was really funny because when I told my partner Nick that you had suggested Zach Bush, she laughed hysterically because my mum is obsessed with Zach Bush. And I mean, I love him as well, but my mum has always said that she hopes that I would marry him. And so when I told Nick, she was like, oh my God, your mum would be over the moon. And I was like, yeah, she really would.
Okay, so if anyone's listening and you want to make Chris's mum really happy and you know Zach Bush, please tell him that we want to talk to him.
Totally, totally. Oh my gosh, it would be really such a beautiful thing to but it would be an awesome season finale actually. Maybe we can
Yes.
invite him to be the season finale episode, and we can just build up to Zach Bush.
Yes.
I love that.
And this is the beauty way, isn't it? Like in the beauty way, we dream, we feel into our dreams, and we live in alignment with our dreams. And we don't shy away from dreaming
Mm.
big. We don't place any limitations or any scarcity or restrictions upon what we're actually able to create.
Totally, totally. And I really have kind of felt that in the last couple of weeks. There's been this new level of embodiment and landing of being in the feeling sensation of the beauty way,
Mm.
and how when it's really landed in the body, what gets created from there are things that your mind wouldn't necessarily be able to kind of create on its own. And so when we're in that feeling sensation of the possibility and the actual like um the availability of that, rather than, like you said, the limitations or the stories that create limitations for our creations, then we may very well have him on the end of the podcast. And if not, someone even more special that we haven't even connected with.
Yeah. Phew, go us. So just when you were sharing that, I would love to ask you a little bit about that particular aspect of the choice to really allow the frequency to settle in the body. So
Mm.
when you say that, for people that are listening, can you describe how one may go about that, like being more present with the frequency?
Yeah. Well, I feel like in my experience, it has been a an unraveling and a like a detaching from all of the aspects of me that would lead the way without my conscious awareness. So I might set an intention or an idea or a thing about my choice to be the embodiment of something. And there will be aspects of me that believe it's not possible to have Zach Bush here. And that aspect of me would be like running the show. And so what I've been doing over the last couple of months, and very, very shout out of gratitude and love to Kerry, who is a beautiful dear soul sister of mine who I've been doing some work with, our friend as well. And what the work has been is really recognizing and highlighting that our spark and our spirit and our soul, our God self, the part of us that is the light, is always there. And there are aspects of us that I guess sort of limit the exposure of that God self through our conditioning, through our lives experiences, etc. And so in my choice to become a greater embodiment of that, I've had to allow that part of me, that aspect of me, to sit in the driver's seat, to make the decisions, to be the one kind of navigating. And so there's had to be a willingness to presence and connect with all the other aspects and create like dialogue and communication between the parts of me that wanted to lead the way from limitation and from story, or from, you know, what's happened in the past, and living from, well, that hasn't happened before, so what's going to make it happen now, you know? And so from that God self embodiment, there's like this settling of gnosis in the body. It's like certainty that is beyond the mind. And so that's kind of been my more recent journey with it. But I feel like even before that next layer, the intention, you know, as you said, and that commitment and that choosing, and then what that inevitably brings is the unraveling of all of the pieces that are not that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that unraveling, and this is something that I've learned being in partnership with James, in that unraveling, how the body feels in the process is super important. It's so, and when I say super important, it's like allowing the feeling to arise, because a lot of the time, if we're living in the trauma and from the conditioning that you're talking about, we're not taking the action that is from our God self. So we're taking the action that means we don't have to feel the triggers or whatever that come from the light, because when we shine a light on something, there's going to be a shadow. And so we stop ourselves from shining the light fully. And when we actually step into that light and we actively look for the light, my experience is all of these feelings arise, and, you know, particularly guilt and shame, because whatever story we've had running previously, all of the feelings arise, and the key is to sit with them, and feel them completely, so that the energy can transmute through the body.
Totally.
And it's something that, like, I think, and you're probably quite similar to me, is at first I found it challenging to understand completely what was happening for other people when they were feeling like really heavy, dense emotions, because that wasn't necessarily my path. But when I go back to what I said in being in relationship with James, that's been part of his journey, is to feel all those dense and heavy emotions. And so I've been able to witness that and have greater compassion for it and greater understanding, which has meant that an element of me that sometimes wanted to bypass, because I'm naturally a positive thinker, has tuned into that ability to feel even more greatly, which has brought me into my body even more.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really interesting thing that I have had to really, I even just said it the other day. I'm like, I feel so solidly in my God self that am I bypassing?
Yeah.
And, the answer is when we're fully embodied in that, the experience of those emotions doesn't feel as dense
Yes.
because we are in and this is where I believe the beauty way comes in. We are in the recognition of the beauty of those pieces
Mm.
of what we would otherwise have perceived, in as a dense or negative emotion. And now it's like, oh, because I'm relating with it in a different way, it feels lighter. There's a completely different experience that we have. And so, yes, they're still there and they're still present and they don't consume us.
Yes. Yeah. I love that so much because it's it can be really challenging to explain to people why, when we're in this place, why we're not necessarily feeling the sadness or the depth of grief or whatever. I personally believe that there is a depth of grief that needs to be felt within oneself. I remember in 2012 when I was going through another layer of my awakening, and I would literally wake up every day and I would be sobbing. And
Mm.
I didn't know why. I didn't understand why. And I was told at that point in time that I just needed to let it be and I needed to let it feel. And I needed to let this grief transmute through my body. And so now, when something bad happens, and somebody feels, um, feels that density, I'm able to hold space in a way that means that I'm not getting dragged down into the emotion. And this is so powerful because we have deeper. I'm not saying this from an ego perspective. I'm saying that we have a great level of compassion and empathy for what's happening, but no need to fully feel it in our body because our body is so grounded and connected to our mind that understands the greater purpose of it all. Is
Mm.
that how does that sound?
Yeah, totally. And I feel like just in the relationship with it that you spoke of, the compassion and the love for it, rather than the resistance or the pushing away of it,
Mm,
that's what makes the relationship with it lighter. That's what makes it
yes.
feel less heavy. So we're still feeling it in the same capacity or like a deep capacity, as you said, like there's a depth to the feeling. However, because the relationship with it isn't, oh, this is bad and wrong. Oh, this is this thing that I shouldn't be feeling, or oh, I want to get away from this, or let it go, or move it, or shift it. There's like it's like when you're in presence with someone who holds like deep acceptance for who you are. It's like, oh, well, I can be more of who I am. It's the
Yes.
same for our emotions and for the feelings and for the experiences, because we have acceptance and love for those aspects of ourselves. All of a sudden, there's a lightness and there's a willingness to be seen rather than the resistance energy. And that resistance energy is what creates more density because we're in resistance to feeling the pain. And so, therefore, it amplifies the intensity of it. And so it feels heavier. Whereas when we can
Yes.
recognize when there's an embodiment of it, I do believe we still have the same amount of sensation. It's just the relationship with it changes.
Because our body actually wants to feel it. Like that's why we came into this body, isn't it? Like we wanted to experience this level of density. And if we constantly push that away, if we constantly not allow the energy to fully anchor in our body is going to scream out to us. And it's going to say, help me. I want to feel. I want to feel.
Yeah, exactly. And metaphysical anatomy, that the whole philosophy around how our emotions express through our body in disease and what have you is such a like a passion of mine. And to really see how when we don't have the relationship with the aspects and we do push them away, all that happens is it expresses through our body, like you said,
Yeah.
in various different forms of disease or discomfort or pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to like go back to that little piece there, the metaphysical anatomy, because it's also one of my favorite things. What was it that really brought you into awareness of metaphysical anatomy? And like, was there a moment in time, or was it over a period of time? What was it that gave you that understanding of, oh my God, there's so much more going on here?
Well, I was lucky enough to have a mum who believed that from when I was a little kid. And so every time I would have any type of condition, it would be, if I had a sore throat, she would say to me, "What are you not speaking up about?" If I had a chest infection, what do you need to get off your chest? And every single thing that I had, that's the relationship that I had with it, because that was what I was being taught and the messaging that I was receiving. And so I used to, I remember, I've got this vivid memory of me as a teenager sitting on a hill at high school with a couple of friends, and we were talking about headaches. And I was saying, because they were taking like a Panadol or something like that, and it was sort of not really a thing in my family to take any form of medication really. And so I had a totally different idea about what you do when you have a headache. And I said to them, what's going on emotionally? Like, why? What are you resisting? What's happening? Like, you have a headache for a reason. Yes, you can take the Panadol, but it's only going to like put a band-aid. There's something there that's creating it. And they were looking at me like I was crazy. And so as far as the moment in time that this became like an awareness, it was a forever thing. And
Amazing.
then I went and studied nutrition. And when I studied that and human anatomy and physiology, and I learned all the biological aspects, I was like, I'm never going to fit fully into this, because that's really valuable and really important. And the core of it is something so much deeper than that. And so that is ultimately what got me into this type of work, really, is these underlying, the depth of how our experience of emotions and feelings and sensations and stories and everything impacts not only our health, but we were talking about earlier on, our trajectory of how we co-create with life, because those things limit us, whether it be in our physical body or in our in our like creations, in our dreams. Yeah. And I know you studied naturopathy as well, right?
Yeah.
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 And were you already into the metaphysical stuff before that, or was that?
No, so it's funny. Like when I'm talking, I'm like gratitude to Carissa's mum, and like I know that my daughters, they've grown up in the way that you obviously grew up with your mum as well, and like sometimes they'd be like, "You're crazy, mum," and but at the same time, like I see them now as young women, and they get it. They really get it, and they can help their friends to be able to move through it as well. And so, but for me, it was when you were telling your story, it was kind of flipped, because I grew up, my mum gave me a really great understanding of nutrition, and she had an awareness of a lot of things. And I remember she had like astrology books and sun sign books and things like that, but she wasn't necessarily a master of any of those things. It was just availability and awareness of these things are in the field. And so then when I decided to study naturopathy, and I was studying herbal medicine actually, and I was in a bookshop in Melbourne, and I was looking for a particular herbal medicine book, and I went up the back the to the secondhand book section, and literally I was standing there and this book jumped off the shelf at me, and it was called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace. And this book was all about medical intuition. It was all about metaphysical anatomy. And I took it home and I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to read this. Like I didn't know at that point in time, I didn't really understand like, oh, am I meant to read this? That wasn't that I was in my late 20s and I was still learning all of this. And I took it home and I just started reading it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it was just like I was absorbing it. And it made so much sense to me. And at the same time, complemented what I was learning about herbal medicine so well, because to me, herbs are, we didn't grow up with a lot of pharmaceutical medications in our house either. When I learned about herbs and their interaction with the body, that made so much sense to me in the way that they work and the way that they connect with our biology. And so the metaphysical anatomy for me felt like the next step. So it feels like it was, like I had to take those steps to arrive at the place where I became so connected to how the unseen impacts our physical form as well.
Yeah. So interesting, like that that we have so many like similar parallels in our stories, and my mum was a naturopath, hence why there was this messaging coming through. And so I had a really deep connection with the herbs. However, because I had that, that's why I went to nutrition, because I felt like I had a bit of enough of an idea to keep me going with herbs, whereas I wanted to go to the next level. I remember when I had a conversation with mum once and I was asking her all these questions about nutrition, and she got to a point where she couldn't answer them. And I was like, oh, I think I need to go and study. And so, yeah, I love that we both kind of had that similar sort of piece around like just having a real deep fascination with the body and how the interactions and then the depth and the core pieces of how our body expresses itself through health from a physical level, but also that emotional level. I mean, that's what really gets me going about like life and this work. It's like our body is such an incredible tool for our like expression, and our understanding of what's going on when we're not consciously aware of it. And when these different things manifest through our body, we can sort of recognize where we maybe haven't fully felt something, because if we haven't been in the full experience of it, then it's going to create and manifest in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And I also love as well that, you having grown up with that particular, background, there was no, well, from what I know about your life, there was no necessity for you to have any sort of like big breakdown or anything like that. Whereas for me, and a lot of people, I think, this process starts as a process of healing. And because I had depression and I was looking for a different way, because they told me that I needed to take antidepressants, and I took antidepressants, and the way they made me feel in my body was just, I knew that that was not where I was supposed to be. And then I learned about St. John's wort, and that took me down that path, right?
Yeah, wow. So cool.
And for so many people, that's how this understanding begins. It begins with choosing to heal ourselves. And for me, I've been talking so much lately about creation is greater than healing, because actually what we're doing when we get to that point where we realize I've got to do something different here in my state of healing, we're actually moving into creation, whether we know it or not. Like, we're just trying to heal and we're just trying to get better, but we're actually moving into creation, because we're not going back to how it was before. We're going to something new. We're evolving. We're creating a new body, essentially. And everyone who chooses to walk this path of the beauty way, I think, has an awareness of that particular thing. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. And as you were sharing just then, I was, that living as that, that creative force that you spoke to, that choosing, that the intention might be to heal. And yet when we we think that means go and see a healer, go and do this, go and, whatever program or whatever. And that's a very important part of the journey, no doubt about it. And when we start to bring through that spirit and that creative force, that the inevitable thing that happens off the back of that is healing. Like, it's
Yes.
like we do it backwards. It's like we go and look for the healer and we go and, all the things. And in the presence of someone who sees us as already healed, who can recognize that God spark, that spirit that is emanating through us, whether we can see it or not, miraculous change happens, and it's this incredible healing that happens through being seen as someone that doesn't even need to be healed,
Yeah.
And I think that's a really profound thing that the industry, I would love for the industry to rise into that level, because I think there's a lot of messaging about needing to be healed in order to. And I think
Yes.
if we just totally flipped that and we'd be like, in order to, that's what creates the healing, And I think that it's a really important message that's on my heart of you already have everything you need,
Yeah.
nobody has something. There's definitely steps along the pathway that support us to become more of who we are.
Yeah.
And if our focus was on the creation of being more of who I am, then I feel like the rest just kind of unfolds.
Unfolds. Yeah. And loop back to what you were saying earlier on when you were talking about Kerry. When you're in the presence of that person who is holding space for your perceived healing, who is seeing you as already healed, they are shining the light. You are looking at the light. So instead of looking at the darkness, which you believed you were in previously, you're looking at the light, and this is what's being reflected back to you. And so, of course, the darkness is going to arise. And in that aspect of the darkness arising, that's when we get to feel, and we're still faced with this incredible light. And so we get to integrate, we get to embrace, and we get to go, right, this light is like, it's not going away. It's still loving me. It's
Mm.
still showing me the light. And
Mm.
even though I'm feeling so dark right now in this process, I just get to be here and I get to be who I am, and I get to still focus on the light and be seen by the light.
Totally. And I think what that light offers us is a mirror reflection to be able to see that we are that as well. And
Yes,
that all of
absolutely.
these denser pieces are simply the clouds in the way of the sun shining, they're just, and so every time we look in that mirror of that light, it's just reflecting back an aspect of our own light that we get to come into greater relationship with.
Mm.
Yeah, I think the greatest what do you call it? Like a myth, I don't know, like a thing that everybody seems to believe. This is a piece that I've received. I've had a lot of questions and curiosity about the bypassing thing, right? Because my experience has often been, I became a master of coaching myself and a master of my
Yeah.
mind, and I could ultimately move my way through something through my mental body. And at one point in time, a couple of years ago, I had to get really, I recognized that I had to get more into my feeling body. I had to come down from my head into my body and actually feel more of the feelings and experience more of the feelings before coaching myself, before having the mental body come in and be like, I can positive mindset my way all over this, just like you said before.
I
And
totally resonate.
yes. And so I had to go on that journey of feeling everything. And it was a real effort. I had to use my coaching mind to coach myself to get in my body and feel my feelings, as opposed to get away from the experience. And what was I saying about the myth is that I just totally lost my train of thought then, but how the myth is that we believe that those feeling experiences and not avoiding them is more important than recognizing the light and not avoiding that. So we have this perception that we bypass our feelings and our emotions if we go to the light. But we don't often recognize that we're bypassing our light when we only go to the emotions and the feelings. And that is like, I'm full thank you to Kerry for that piece, because she shined that light on with me when we had these conversations about bypassing. She's like, so many people are bypassing their God self, their spirit, the aspect of them that is already in the embodiment of the greatest expression of who we are. There's an aspect of us that already lives there. It's just, how can we bring more of that into the body? And any time that we are bypassing that is true, that's as important as when we say that we're bypassing our emotions. It's like, well, in the full embodiment feeling of the emotions, we're also bypassing the God self, the spirit, who is actually totally having a different relationship with that experience.
Yeah, I love that. And I would love to just share a little story that amplifies what you just said. And I know that he won't mind me sharing it because he shared it lots of times. And there was a point after we'd done lots of healing, because on our own personal journey, we started in deep trauma, and James and I did we did all of our healing and creation together. And we came together when we were really young, and we brought all our stuff with us, and then we've moved into relationship, and 25 years later, we're still here. We are not the same people that we were. But there was this, when we started on this path back in 2008, there were a few years where we learned all the things and we learned all the techniques. And there was some things that James was finding really hard to shift. And at one point he said to me, right, I'm going to go and meditate. I'm going to go into a stress position and I'm going to be with this. I'm going to sit with this. And at this point, because I could see what was happening, I said to him, babe, how long do you need to sit with this before you actually begin to receive the light of who you are? And when I said that to him, I triggered him, and he was able to actually go, you're right. I've been here so many times before. I've been in this exact place. And each time I think I need to go and sit with it and find out what's wrong with me, instead of going, okay, I'm feeling this right now, and I am going to move in this direction because this is what I want. I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to delve into it, and I'm not going to try and figure out, my past life or my what my mum gave me or what my dad gave me or all of those types of things. I'm going to choose to create something new. And that moment is super powerful.
So powerful, and it's funny because just circling back to what I think your question was going to be about, how my upbringing had a lot of that messaging within it, is I feel like that's what it gave me.
Yeah.
Because my experience with, don't get me wrong, I have had my absolute fair share of self-doubt and all the things that everybody experiences. I'm not immune to that just because I've had that sort of messaging in my upbringing. However, what it did enable was a real willingness to be in less resistance to the parts of me, as in I wasn't telling the story that experience was wrong.
Yeah.
Because I was always told that it was a lesson or a blessing.
Yes.
And so in the not making it wrong, there's a greater level of acceptance for not just all these aspects of myself, but also all these aspects of life.
Yeah.
And so in that, I believe that there's less of a resistance to there being challenging things. And in the more internal personal journey, there's less of a seeking for the thing that's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I think that is what I offer to people, because when they come to me, I'm not looking for what's wrong with them.
Yes.
And so if I'm not looking for what's wrong with them, then they can dissolve their own relationship of I'm looking for something that's wrong with me, And then they can build more into the gnosis, the knowing, like the embodied knowing of their like self-love, self-compassion journey of like, I no longer need to seek and fix.
Yes.
I can just be in a continually greater expression of who I am and know that those pieces kind of fall away.
Yeah. Such a pivotal shift is, and it's such a powerful message to receive from somebody when we interact with them, is I have all of my own self-doubts and all of the things that are going on in my mind. And especially when I am met with someone who is reflecting my light back to me, all of the not enoughness and all of the self-doubts arise. And when I'm then met with that person who just holds that space of love, I get to deepen into the body and feel safe, because that's what our body wants to. It wants to feel safe.
Yeah.
To express exactly as I need to express with every little piece that comes to me. And there's no fixing in there. It is accepting the moment exactly as it is, and knowing, like you said, the gnosis of, this is the action that needs to be taken in this moment. And I feel 100% confident in my body to take this action. I know that I've got what it takes to take this action.
Yeah, awesome. And the question I was going to ask off the back of that, I kind of feel like you sort of half already answered it. But what impact do you believe that that has on your creativity?
Oh, it's massive. What's the impact? Be a bit more specific, Kirsty. The impact on the
It's
creativity, I
massive.
think, is that there's this gnosis that develops, using that word that you've just brought in so beautifully, this gnosis that develops that whatever I create is perfect, because I am in full integrity. I'm in full embodiment of what I know to be true for me, and also acceptance that this thing that's true for me might not be true for somebody else, but it's okay, because my creation is just as important as the next person's creation. And if you bring that back to the beauty way, how massive is this? Doesn't this like
Totally.
completely intertwine with, if everybody was living in that state, the beauty that we would be surrounded by on a daily basis would be phenomenal.
Totally. Totally. And I feel like the for my own journey, I've often pushed up against, am I doing this right when it comes to my own creations? And that is the killer of all creative endeavors.
Yeah.
It's such a killer. And so when, as you spoke, when we bring through that and we embody that, the acceptance and all those pieces and our willingness to create from that place and let go of the perfectionism and everything, there is no right and wrong. There is just, this is something that wants to come through me and be expressed in the world. Can I allow that?
Yeah. Can I allow it is a perfect thing. Again, comes back to what we spoke about before. Well, this is my personal belief. Comes back to what we spoke about before about empathy, compassion, and acceptance. Because if I can have complete empathy, compassion, and acceptance for myself, it means that I'm going to fully receive my creations, my inspiration, exactly as it arises. And I'm going to know that the way that I express it is in perfection. And therefore, I am allowing all other expressions in perfection as well. And even those expressions that collectively want to be seen as bad or negative or detrimental.
Totally. And,
Mm.
as you know, I work with human design as part of like one of the things that I co-create with. And human design has, like, part of the philosophy of human design is that we as a collective are moving from homogenization into differentiation.
Mm.
And I feel like for this generation, we are kind of have gritted and battled our way to this kind of experience of differentiation, of being the uniqueness being a good thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like, even when I think about me in high school and primary school, 20 to 30 years ago, it was all about get as much the same as other people as you can, because that's
Yeah.
what has you be accepted, fit in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And whilst I think that's part of the condition of being a child and a teenager in our, years of growing up, I think that the societal impact of thousands of years of conforming, of get everybody to, even our school systems are totally set up for homogenization.
Yeah.
And so that kills creativity through, like, you have to do it the same as someone else in order for it to be correct, and even though I had great messaging, I still struggle with those pieces sometimes of like, am I doing it right,
Yeah.
and I have to really like unravel that every time I face it, and I have to bring through that part of me that knows that this is the way that it's got to be created. And as this kind of forefront of the movement have been willing to do the hard thing, which is to break away from that homogenized state of
Mm.
sameness and fitting inness and come into a more differentiated state of uniqueness, I believe that this work that we have done and are still doing is going to have such an incredibly huge impact. And we can already see that with the next generation. I'm sure that it looks really different for your daughters to what it looked like when you were that age, as far as them being in a greater unique expression and a greater like acceptance of that great expression, that
Mhm.
unique expression. And I
Yeah.
feel like I mean, I don't have many connections with teenagers. I don't know many teenagers at this particular current time. Uh, but my sense is that there's a great, and even just from witnessing the movement around expression and gender expression, all these different things, I think that there's a greater acceptance happening and a greater like celebration of differentiation.
Yeah.
And I think that us moving in these ways that we just spoke about through unraveling the pieces that prevent that and limit us is what is making it available for the next generation. Do
Yeah.
you feel like you see that, because you have certainly more interactions with teenagers than I do? Do you feel like you have witnessed that in their sort of uh, collective of that age group?
Yeah. I feel like there's two aspects to it because um 100% like my daughters have experienced similar to what you experienced of that even though they're looking at a situation and they're going, this doesn't feel right at all, there's still, oh my God, if I do this differently in the way that feels good for me, am I doing it right? And so yeah, there's that aspect. And I feel what's happening in that generation now is that there's a big exploration of all that's different and unique. And those that have grown with a deeper connection to their feeling body are able to have greater discernment in doing it their own way, in uniqueness, in integrity. And
Mhm.
those that have been down that path of homogenization, it's that false acceptance. So what you and I were talking about, like that false positivity and like, oh my God, I've got to be positive. It's like that. So it's the polarities that are
Mhm.
expressing, but more of the teens are getting an opportunity to explore this, which is a really good thing. Like there is
Mm.
nothing wrong with what's going on at the moment because people are getting an opportunity to see so starkly what feels good for me and what doesn't feel good for me. and all of the ways in which they're shown the suggestion of what's right or what's not right, they get to bring it home and go, no, actually, this is my beauty way. This is what feels good for me. And then start to walk that, and then get to even feel even more of like, oh my God, is this what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah, totally. And I love that, you know, your daughters had that experience of being more encouraged and experiencing of the feeling experience. And I think that what that has at least offered me, and I imagine you would see the same with them, is that there's a willingness to do it the other way.
Yeah.
Like, even though like those little pieces of doubt come up, they're still moving in that direction, you know, whereas I feel like without that, there's a limit. There's oh, I can't, you know, the amount of times that I've heard people say, I'm doing a job that I'm locked into and I can't move out of it. You know, it's like, well, you can, you're just unwilling to, you know, but that foundational essence of the love and acceptance for no matter what I do and how I do it offers us a pathway to do the hard thing and know that we're still going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, there's that like safety that kind of resides. And as you were sharing that, I was thinking, like, you know, I said before that I've had my absolute own experiences of the doubt and the like, am I doing this right? And then as you were sharing about your teenage daughters, I was like, you know what? When I was 12 years old, I had the opportunity to go. My parents gave me the option of what school to go to for my high school. They gave me two options and I got to choose. Now, in that choice, I had one choice, which was every single person from my primary school was going to school A. And only one person that I knew from my kindergarten was going to school B. And I think that, you know, 98% of 12-year-olds would pick the one with their friends. And I was like, nah, do you know what? I mean, I knew that I wanted to have a different experience to them. And I knew that I wanted to break away from those like structured friendship groups and stuff. And so even though I loved them, I was also like, you know what? And I chose option B. And I knew at that time that that was like a really weird choice to make. I knew that I was like really unique in that experience, but there was some form of certainty that was underlying my decision of I can't make a wrong decision.
Yeah.
Because I guess that was what the messaging was. And then when I was 18 and coming out of high school, all of my friends were going to university. And my parents said, you don't have to go. If you like, we'd prefer you to go and experience the world. Take time off. Don't study unless you feel like you feel good about and know what you want to study. And so I didn't. And I didn't actually go to study until I was 27 years old. And I went traveling, I worked, I did all kinds of awesome things. And what it meant was that when I did make the choice, it was like, this is really what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that if I look at the experiences of people around me in those times, a lot of them were doing what they felt like they had to do. They didn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, do you feel like with your daughters, for example, even though those pieces come up, that willingness is what kind of is where the like foundational support lies?
It's funny that you just said that word, because that's exactly the word that was coming to me, was the willingness to question, the willingness to take a different path. And because certainly for me, I went down the path that I thought I should and needed to go on as well. You know, I joined the army because I was going to get a free degree and my mum didn't have to pay for it, because that's what you do. You go to university. And it wasn't until I was 27 as well when I realized, okay, I want to do something different with my life. So, and with my daughters, because they grew up in an environment that was supportive of them being able to make a decision, things shifted much more easily for them, because they had that role modeling and also the encouragement and the nurturing. When Abby was 12, all of her people that were homeschool friends
Yeah.
were going to high school, because there was a belief of like, you can homeschool when you're in primary school, but when you go to high school, you need to go to high school. And I was like, well, you get to decide, Abs. And she's like, oh, well, I think I would like to. I think I would like to just, check it out. And so I said, okay, well, you do a little bit of research. And she researched and she thought, okay, the local Steiner is probably where I would like to go. And then it was coming up to a couple of days before the actual open day for the Steiner. And I said to her, so are we going to the Steiner? And she's like, you know what, Mum? I've decided that you and Dad don't work 9 to 5, so I'm not about to start either. I was like, yes.
It is so
Her
awesome.
girlfriend.
What a queen.
And so she never went to high school. And then that led the way for her sister. Her sister decided in year 8, she actually decided to go. And she went for 6 months. And then she said, this is crazy. Like, I don't understand what's going on here.
Why do people do this to themselves? Yeah, I love that.
And that was their choice. I'm in no judgment. Like, we knew that each of our daughters needed to make their choice, just like your parents said, you get to choose. We knew they needed to make their choice. We weren't about to. And this is like a whole nother conversation that we could have. Teenagers need to go through their own rebellion, their own process of revolution in order to choose. And this is something that's not necessarily supported in our society either. And the willingness, go back to the willingness, because we don't want to like go on for 3 hours today. The willingness to actually choose and to be in it for the long run is what's key to us being able to live the beauty way.
Yeah. And, what was coming through as you were just sharing that was how much of an impact the absence of has. And so your kids still need to go through their process. It's part of becoming an adult, is to trial and error and test this and see if I like that and da 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 da. And in the absence of your resistance, in the absence of you having control over, means that there's not just a willingness, but there's also an ease in the process, because it's like, oh, it's enough to battle with my own self-doubt, my own questioning, my own uncertainty, my own like wanting to fit into my friends. If I have to add on top of that, my parents need for me to do this thing, or want for me to do this thing, or resistance to me doing this thing, that just adds a whole other layer. So it's almost like it just takes one of the layers off. It doesn't mean that that we are without all of the layers. It just means that there's like a greater, like, I can breathe and move through this without also having to make my mum proud.
Yeah.
And I think that when we think about that from the perspective of, in this now, as us, apart from our teenage selves and teenagers in this reality, like as individuals now, the quicker we can unravel the pieces that are that layer of like pressure of what my parents wanted, that's a really big part of the healing journey, is to unravel those pieces. If that is what has been placed upon us, that gives way to greater expression and creativity, and greater to the beauty way of our soul's experience in this life, because we're no longer doing it because our parents influenced us to, or society influenced us to, or our partner is influencing us to, or wherever it's coming from. And it's actually a natural expression of the desire of our soul.
Yeah. So perfectly articulated.
It's funny because I wrote this random note before we started, and I was like, oh, I don't really know what that's about, but here it is now. It's like through this generation of willingness to unravel these pieces, we are literally anchoring these templates of uniqueness.
Yes.
We are creating a new blueprint for how humans get to be expressed, and how the soul gets to be expressed through the human. And like you said earlier, if we had more individuals on the planet living in that way, through the beauty way, through their own creative expression, through the soul moving through their body, the world would be a better place, no doubt about it. And so, yeah, I feel excited for the generations to come off the back of this movement that is this space of how can we create in unique and soul aligned ways that don't necessarily fit within the box. And yeah, it's funny. I had a client call with someone the other day, and they were asking me to tell them like which way they should go with a particular thing that they're creating. And we were both laughing because they were like, "Oh shit, you're not going to give me," they were saying to me, you're not going to give me a cookie cutter way, are you?" And I'm like, "Nope." Like, and that is what I love about like co-creating with people in that way, is like, let's give more permission to do it a different way and do it a unique way and be in celebration of that. It's something I was going to say before when we were talking about the emotions. It's more than acceptance and just allowing. It's like when we go to the next level of celebrating that part of us,
Totally.
it's like, wow, there's like a whole another level of breakthrough. Can we be in celebration of that, of the willingness to connect with that core shame or guilt, and celebrating that part of us had that experience rather than, making it wrong or whatever. And that celebration energy brings so much availability for something special.
And that's what a balanced parent does. And this conditioning that we talked about earlier on in the conversation, the conditioning is that, exactly as you said, we've got to go this way, we've got to do it this way, the homogenization. And what we're doing now is we're going, actually, there's another way. And the balanced parent just stands back and allows the children to make the earth is like such a great role model as a balanced parent. She stands back, he, whatever, stands back and lets us do whatever we need to do so that we actually learn our own boundaries. We learn our own sense of integrity, our own sense of discernment. And yeah, so incredibly powerful when we as humans can actually tune into that frequency and let our children live like that. And that's what, yeah, as you were speaking, I'm like, we need to have somebody in and we'll have a conversation about parenting.
Totally.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, same. And as you were just talking about the earth, then I was like seeing how our perception of like the problems that we have on this planet, with pollution and warming and, all of the different things that we're navigating as a collective right now. That analogy that you used of like the parenting with how Earth treats us, like Earth is literally just like letting humans fuck it up. And it's such an analogy for our own individual internal world. It's like when we recognize the impact that we're having on ourselves, the impact that we're having on like putting junk food into our bodies, putting rubbish onto the earth, like the two are the same.
Yeah.
And the greater that we come into the highest alignment and integrity with our greatest expression, those things tend to fall away. We do less harm to ourselves, and so therefore we do less harm to the earth because we have a reverence for ourselves, which then has us have a reverence for not just the earth but other humans, other people. And so there's this incredible synergy that will happen, that the impact that we have when we go on our own journey of our greatest expression will have the greatest impact on our planet, because we are no longer treating it like a dumpster ground in the same way that we treat ourselves that way, with our thoughts, with our internal experiences. And imagine what's possible. Like, our planet is so beautiful already, and imagine the flourishing that happens. And the same is true for humans. The same expression gets to be available, like an even more beautiful experience. Mm.
I'm so grateful that you said yes to co-creating with me.
Me too. This has been
This
so
has been
fun.
such an awesome conversation, and we could like go on all day.
I agree. I agree. So great. Yeah.
And I'm sure that everyone that's listening like has tuned into our original intention, which is just to have deep and meaningful conversations. And I feel like that's what we've done today. We've set a pretty high bar.
Yeah, totally. And I think we've created an epic introduction to the conversations that we're going to have, because, you know, whilst some of our conversations will be the two of us riffing off on a topic, we also have a couple of people that we're, you know, including Zach Bush, that we're going to bring on to the podcast, but also who's going to be sort of energetically aligned from off the back of this conversation. Is we've got some epic conversations coming up around how we can be in that greater unique expression, how that gets to be expressed through our creativity, and how that can be so uniquely different to anything, and how you can be like in your success and in your enjoyment and fulfillment and satisfaction in your reality through that unique expression.
Mm.
And so I'm really excited for our next episodes to come as well.
Me too.
So great.
And that feels complete today.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for everyone who's listening. And I have no doubt that everyone who's listening received something from this conversation today. So get ready to have your socks knocked off. You.
It's awesome. Thanks so much, Kirsty, for inviting me and for having me for this conversation, and for all the ones that we're going to have from here. I feel super excited about this project that we're working on together, and super aligned. And yeah, I'm just really pumped for all that unfolds from here. So thank you.
Me too. Woohoo.
Woo-woo.
See you next time, everyone.
Yeah, bye.